Hello there, my name is Luciano Oliveira. I am a Brazilian attorney, and today we're going to be talking about buying properties in Rio de Janeiro, a step-by-step from a foreign citizen perspective. Important to note that for a foreign citizen to buy properties in Brazil, many of the steps are similar to the steps required for a Brazilian to buy, but not all of them. There are specific steps that apply only to foreign citizens. That's why it is important for you to understand some of the main legal requirements, and in addition to knowing those requirements, to have a professional help during the process of buying your property in Rio de Janeiro. A pretty basic step is to obtain the Brazilian tax ID called CPF, and we have a complete guide on our website. You can do it for free if you want, or if you need like professional help, we can also assist you with obtaining the tax ID known as CPF. It's important for you to consider if you're going to hire an attorney or a law firm to assist you. A real estate agency can help you, particularly if this real estate agency has fluent English speakers and if they have a long-term experience with foreign citizens. Unfortunately, if you ask them, I would guess the majority of the agencies are going to say, yes, we have a lot of experience. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. Hiring a law firm specializing in foreign citizens may be a good idea. Some clients, they are going to hire a firm for the entire scope of the purchase. Some clients, they are going to work with an attorney only on the key points of the transaction. For instance, reviewing the deed, reviewing the contract to be signed, and reviewing the closing papers once it gets to the closing. Our recommendation is for you to hire an attorney for at least those key points, if not for the entire transaction. Professional help may also help you understand what you should look for when visiting properties, and to have an idea about the issues that may arise when you pick the wrong property. Regarding the search for the property, usually it is done by a real estate agency. We have some real estate agencies in our network. If you don't know any realtor or real estate agency in Rio de Janeiro, reach out to us and we're going to be glad to share some referrals with you. When searching for the property, it is important that you do not rush yourself. Realtors in Rio de Janeiro, or probably anywhere in the world, they're going to be pushing you to make an offer. Sometimes they even say, you know what, just make an offer. Let's see if the seller accepts. They want you to commit to that specific property. And if you do so, the seller may well just say, yes, let's move forward. And once they accept your offer, you are kind of stuck in that situation. It is difficult for you to say, you know what, I wasn't sure, let's, see other properties. So it is absolutely important that you take your time and you do not let other people rush you. Once you found the right property, you may want to make an offer for 5 or even 10% less of the selling price. It is customary in the Brazilian market for the seller to give you some breaking price, although it's not like a huge break like 20%. What we see in most transactions, it's going to be something closer to 5 or 7% and sometimes even 10%, but 20% is absolutely rare. And if you find a seller that's willing to sell for a 20% break, there may be some concerns there because of the huge price reduction. Once the price has been agreed, you're going to move to the contracting stage. For the contract, we usually ask the seller realtor to provide an initial draft. It is good to have the initial draft coming from the seller because it's like you giving some consideration. You're saying, listen, let me know your terms. Once we get to the draft, of course, we're going to do a thorough review on the draft, and we're going to add clauses that are specific to address the particularities of a foreign citizen buying a property in Brazil. In Rio de Janeiro, it's not rare for realtors to ask to close in 15 days after signing the contract. But because you are a foreign citizen, you're going to want to have at least 45 days between signing the contract and attending the closing. The reason for that is because there are specific documents that you're going to need to provide. For instance, if you're single, you're going to need a birth certificate, but the birth certificate cannot be any birth certificate that you have. You're going to need to request like a fresh birth certificate in your country of origin, more specifically, like if you are in the US in the state where you were born. In some states like California, this may take over 30 days. So how can you sign a contract saying that you're going to close in 15 days if you're going to need a document that's going to take 30 days to be issued? After the document is issued, you still need to get an apostille. Many countries, they are part of the apostille, the Hague Convention. So you get an apostille is a form of legalization internationally on your birth certificate, and then this birth certificate will have to be sent to Brazil. So it's gonna be sworn, translated in Brazil, and only then this document is gonna be acceptable for a closing. So as you can see, there are lots of steps that are not required for a Brazilian citizen. And most realtors in Rio de Janeiro, despite the huge number of foreign citizens in Rio de Janeiro, realtors, they don't know about those specifics. So when they are working with you, they're just gonna say, oh, you know what, we can close in 15 days. Because they are used to sell properties to Brazilian citizens, they don't understand the specificities of selling a property to a foreign citizen. Another important aspect of the contract stage is to have language in the contract saying that the seller is going to collaborate with the buyer in terms of providing the paperwork required for the currency exchange. Sellers, the same thing as realtors, most of them never sold a property to a foreign citizen, so they are going to assume you're going to make a wire transfer just like it's done locally, and the money is going to show up in their account. However, that does not happen. Whenever you send a wire transfer to Brazil, the wire does not go automatically to the seller. It's actually sent to the compliance department of the bank that for high amounts, it's going to take a while for the bank to go through the documents and approve the release of the funds. So again, that's why it's so important to have enough time so you can have all of those things completed, and also a clause in the contract saying that the seller is going to collaborate in terms of providing the paperwork needed for the currency exchange to be done. After the contract is revised and it's on point, you're going to sign the contract, and then the clock starts to run, and you need to run to get everything in place for the closing in terms of moving the monies and also in terms of getting the due diligence done. Many real estate agencies, they help with the due diligence, but usually they are able to handle the more like basic or intermediary level due diligence, because when there are legal issues involved, of course, they are not able to understand those issues or to assess the risk involved. That's why when you hire a law firm, on the other hand, the law firm is going to be able to assess the risks across the board and advise you if everything is clear and everything is good for a closing. Talking about due diligence, two very important things for you to understand, particularly if you are from the US. In the US, you have like the title insurance. Title insurance means like if the title is bad, someone is gonna take the bill. There is no such thing in Brazil. So if you buy a bad title property in Brazil, your money is gone, and good luck suing the seller. That's the first thing. Second thing, there is no escrow account, believe it or not. So if you're buying $1 million property, the way it works is like this. You're gonna pay the seller first, the money is gonna get into the seller's pocket, and then the seller is gonna sign the transfer deed. Pretty concerning, right? So what we do here at the firm, we try to time the release of the funds on the day of the closing, at the time of the closing. So we work with the currency exchange bank. We keep, playing by ear, because it's pretty difficult for us to tell exactly the day of the closing. We have the time limit of 45 days, but usually the closing is gonna be, I don't know, like on day 39, day 40, day 41, never on day 45. It should not be on day 45, because if for, some circumstances you need to delay and you cross the limit, the time limit, you may trigger the penalty that you don't want to trigger. So because there is no escrow account, there is also this concern of how you're going to pay the seller. And particularly on the due diligence, if the title is bad, nobody's picked the bill. Nobody's going to pick the bill, and you're going to be on your own. So you better have an ironclad due diligence, so everything is, good for you to close on the property. Now let's talk about the closing. So the closing, it's scheduled with a registry. This registry is known in Brazil as cartório. Some people mistranslate cartório as notary public. Notary public, it's not the same thing, right? particularly if you are from the US, you know that a notary public, it may be like a clerk at a UPS store. The cartório in Brazil, the officer that runs the cartório, it's a person who's experienced in law and usually has studied law for 20, 30, or sometimes even 40 years to pass a very demanding public examination to be able to handle a cartório. Okay, so cartório, the cartório officer and the notary public, they are not the same thing. The cartório is going to assist with the closing. They are going to supervise the closing. They are going to prepare the papers. They are going to prepare the transfer papers or the transfer deed, right, to make an analogy to the US system. And the closing is going to be the actual act of signing the transfer deed. For that to happen, the cartório is going to require some certificate of clearances. These certificate of clearances, they represent to the cartório that the seller doesn't owe monies, for instance, to the federal government, doesn't owe monies to the state, doesn't owe monies to the municipality, and it does not have like labor lawsuits, which is something big in Brazil. Labor lawsuits or labor unpaid taxes, this kind of stuff. This is addressed by the clearance certificates. The clearance certificates, they do bring some security to the buyer. Some, it's a sign that things are good. The registry is going to prepare the papers for the closing, and then on the day of the closing, you need to attend the closing, or you may also have a power of attorney holder attending on your behalf. However, a heads up, a power of attorney for foreign citizens, if done in Brazil, it's pretty easy. You basically spend a couple of hours in a cartório to get the power of attorney done. However, if you are abroad and you are a foreign citizen, to draft and legalize the power of attorney may take several weeks, in some cases even more than a month. So it is important for you from the get-go to plan if you're going to attend the closing or not. And on the day of the closing, remember, you're going to need to have the seller fully paid for the balance of the transaction. And for you to do that is not just to send a wire from your bank. You need to plan up front because, again, once the money is sent to Brazil, the receiver bank is going to handle a complex compliance review of the document, so you're not going to send 2 or 3 days before. We usually work with a currency exchange partner bank who's going to do the review up front, so when you send the money, everything is clear for the money to be released to the seller. Additionally, like we said before, you would want to time the release of the money with the closing. You don't want the money to be released like a week before the closing, because let's say if something happens to the seller in the meantime, then instead of getting the property you're dreaming of, you're going to be entangled in a probate in Brazil. And probates in Brazil is not rare for probates to take like a decade, a couple of decades to resolve. So instead, if something happens to the seller, instead of getting a property, you're going to be getting a nightmare. So that's why it's extremely important to time the release of the money with the closing. So that was it for this video. There are odd steps that we address in different videos, so follow us for more.